Last July, I walked out to my garden at 7 a.m. and the temperature was already 94 degrees. By noon, it hit 108. And every single zucchini plant I had, gone, cooked right in the ground. 3 years in a row, I thought the problem was my soil, or my watering schedule, or just bad luck. I tried everything the YouTube videos told me to try. I watered deeper. I mulched heavier. I bought expensive fertilizers from the garden center. Nothing worked. Turns out I was growing the wrong crops entirely. The plants that were made for this kind of heat, I wasn't growing any of them, and most of them grow vertical, which means they work in almost any backyard, any patio, any chain link fence you've got. No extra land required. I'm going to show you all 9 today. But there's one on this list, one crop that I genuinely cannot believe more American gardeners aren't growing. It survived 47 days without a single drop of rain in my yard and still produced. I'll get to that one, but first I need to tell you something about how I almost gave up on summer gardening altogether. By the time this video is done, you're going to have 9 crops that laugh at drought, grow up instead of out, so they work even if your space is tiny, and keep producing when everything else in your garden has already given up. Whether you're gardening in Zone 9 in Texas or Zone 6 in Missouri, at least 6 of these will work for you right now, this season. I'm going to tell you exactly when to plant each one, what to grow them on, where to find the seeds, and what not to do, because I've already made every mistake so you don't have to. Let's get into it. I've been gardening in Zone 7B for going on 19 years. And I'll be honest with you, after the first decade, I fought the summer. I kept planting what the seed catalogs told me to plant. I kept watering more, staking more, worrying more. Every August felt like a defeat. My neighbors would walk by and I could tell they felt sorry for me. Brown leaves, cracked fruit, half the garden just done. And then one summer I just stopped trying to fight it. Instead of looking at my garden, I started looking at what was thriving outside my garden, not at the nursery, not in somebody else's raised bed. I started paying attention to what was growing in the abandoned lots, along the roadsides, in my neighbor's fence line where nothing got watered, ever. Those plants were dark green, heavy with growth, alive in a way my garden rarely was in August. That summer changed everything I thought I knew about growing food in heat. And it led me eventually to these 9 plants. I'm a little embarrassed it took me 10 years to figure it out. But here we are. The first crop on this list is Malabar Spinach. And before you tell me you've tried spinach and it always bolts, this is not that spinach. Malabar spinach is thick and glossy and almost tropical looking because it is tropical. It came originally from Southeast Asia, and it has absolutely no interest in cool weather. While regular spinach is turning bitter and shooting up a flower stalk in May, Malabar spinach is just waking up. It hits its stride when your daytime temps are sitting at 90 degrees or above. The leaves are a deep, rich green. They feel almost waxy when you run your fingers over them. When you cook them down, they have a slight texture to them, a little like okra, a little like cooked down greens. And they work beautifully in soups, stir-fries, anything where you want a leafy green that won't turn to mush. My grandmother called it vine spinach. She grew it up the back fence every single summer and I never thought anything of it. I just thought that was what you grew. It was only years later I realized most people around me had never even seen it. Old-timers in the South knew something we forgot. To grow it. Run it up a tomato cage, a length of chain link fence, a bamboo teepee. Anything was something to grab onto. Zones 7 through 11. Plant after your last frost date. In the deep South, direct sow in April. It is drought tolerant once established. Do not baby it. Now, Malabar spinach is impressive. But here's the thing about vertical growing that most people get completely backwards. And if you are making this mistake, it is actually making your drought problem worse, not better. I'll show you exactly what I mean with the next crop. Crop 2, Armenian cucumber. Most people who grow cucumbers in summer get one of 2 results. Either the plants give up in the heat, or the fruit gets bitter, or both. And almost every time the problem is the same, they're growing the wrong cucumber. Armenian cucumber is not actually a cucumber. It is a muskmelon. It just grows like a cucumber, tastes like a cucumber, and gets used like a cucumber. But under the soil, it has a root system that behaves completely differently. It goes looking for water instead of waiting for you to bring it. Here is the thing most people don't know about horizontal vegetable growing in summer. The surface soil temperature in a U.S. garden in July can run 20 to 30 degrees hotter than the air temperature above it. When your cucumbers are trailing along the ground, the fruit is sitting on soil that might be 120 degrees on a 95-degree day. No wonder they cook before you can pick them. When you grow Armenian cucumber vertically, up a fence, up a trellis, up anything, the fruit hangs in moving air. It stays cooler. It develops fully. The flavor is sweeter and milder than a standard cucumber. Longer too, sometimes 3 feet, zones 5 through 10. Direct sow after soil hits 65 degrees. Great for the southwest, great for the southeast. And here's something almost everyone throws away. Don't. The skin. It is completely edible, mild, tender, and it is where a lot of the nutrition lives. Slice it thin, peel and all, and it changes the whole experience of eating it fresh. Crop 3. Yardlong beans. Every gardener I have ever met who grows beans in the U.S. plants them in spring, maybe May, maybe early June. And by July, they are done with beans for the year. The plants are finished. The heat got them. Yardlong beans do not work that way. These beans are heat activated. That is the only way I know how to describe it. A 95-degree week in August does not stress them. It signals them to produce harder. The hotter and more miserable your summer gets, the more these plants seem to decide they have something to prove. They grow fast. 3-4 inches of new growth in a day during a hot spell. The beans themselves get, as the name suggests, up to 1.5 feet long. They taste like a rich, slightly nutty green bean with more chew, more substance. You cannot grow them on the ground. Without a trellis, the beans touch the soil and rot before you can pick them. They need at least 6 feet of vertical structure. Cattle panel, remesh, heavy-duty tomato ladders from Lowe's and whatever you have, they will find it and climb it. Zones 7 through 11, plant in June, harvest through September, in Georgia, in Alabama, in Texas, in the whole swath of the American South. This is your summer bean, the one that keeps going when everything else has already waved the white flag. Heat does not stop it. Nothing stops it, okay? Those first 3 crops are available at most decent nurseries. You might even find a few of them at a well-stocked garden center. But the next 3, you are probably not going to find them at your local Home Depot garden center, and that is exactly why they work so well, because almost no one around you is growing them. Crop 4, Luffa Gourd. Yes, the same thing as a shower sponge. But here's what most people do not know. When you harvest a loofah young, under 6 inches, it is completely edible. The texture is like a mild zucchini, slightly firmer, slightly more neutral in flavor. In Chinese and Indian cooking, young loofah is a staple summer vegetable. It has been for centuries. Loofah is drought-tolerant in a way that most vegetable crops are not. Once the roots are established, which takes about 3 weeks after transplant, this plant is largely on its own. It goes looking for what it needs. But what makes loofah special for summer heat gardening is the architecture of the plant. Loofah can grow 10, 12, 15 feet in a single season. It wants to go overhead. Grow it over a pergola, bend a cattle panel into an arch, run it up an arbor, and the leaves create a canopy, a living roof. The shade underneath drops the soil temperature meaningfully. You are growing food and cooling your garden at the same time. Zones 7 through 10. Long growing season. Start indoors in March in colder zones, direct sow in April in the deep south after last frost. Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds carries it. Southern Exposure Seed Exchange carries it. Amazon has it. Most local garden centers do not. Crop 5, Tromboncino squash. I want to talk about powdery mildew for a second, because if you have grown squash in the American summer, you have lost squash to powdery mildew. That white fuzzy coating that shows up on the leaves in August spreads fast and collapses the plant. Tromboncino squash is the answer to that problem. While your zucchini is covered in white fuzz and dying back, Tromboncino just keeps climbing. It is not immune to mildew in some mystical way. It resists it because of how it grows. Powdery mildew spreads through soil splash. Every time rain or irrigation water hits the ground near your plants, it throws fungal spores up onto the lower leaves. When your squash trails along the ground, there is no escape. But when it grows vertically, the leaves are up off the soil surface in moving air, drying fast after rain. The Tromboncino fruit is long and curved, shaped like a trombone, which is where the name comes from. The flavor sits somewhere between a butternut squash and a zucchini. Nutty, creamy. You can eat it young as a summer squash or leave it to mature into a winter storage gourd that will keep for months. Zones 5 through 10. Massive vines 10 feet or more. It needs something sturdy. Cattle panel, hog wire, a strong fence. A single plant can give you 20 to 30 fruits in a season. Plant it once and just get out of its way. I want to pause here for a second. Because what I just told you about tromboncino and powdery mildew, that principle applies to the next crop too, but in a completely different way. And this next one is the one my grandfather grew, and I didn't even realize it had a name until I was in my 30s. Crop 6, Tepary Beans. Tepary beans were grown by the Tohono O'odham people of the Sonoran Desert for hundreds of years before European settlers arrived in the Americas. And I want to be careful about the word I use here, because the word matters. These beans are not drought tolerant, they are drought adapted. There is a difference. Drought tolerant means a plant can survive dry conditions. Drought adapted means a plant evolved in dry conditions. Its entire biology, is the way it germinates, the way it roots, the way it flowers and sets seed, was shaped by scarcity, by long dry stretches followed by short monsoon bursts, by soil that bakes in summer and freezes in winter. Tepary beans can produce a meaningful harvest on as little as 8 to 10 inches of annual rainfall. Common beans need 16 to 20 inches minimum. That gap is not small. My grandfather had a row of these along the back fence. He never watered it. Never. I used to watch it as a kid and wonder why he even bothered. It looked rough, always. Dusty, a little ragged. But every fall there were beans. More than we could eat. I thought it was just beans. It was something much older than that. Zones 6 through 10. Perfect for the southwest, the southern plains, anywhere the summer bakes. Plant in late spring after soil warms. Push seeds into dry ground. This plant actually prefers dry conditions at germination. It climbs 3 to 4 feet on a simple fence. Source them from nativeseeds/search at nativeseeds.org. That organization has been preserving these varieties for decades. They are worth your support. Here's where I need to stop and tell you something that nobody in the gardening space talks about, because I have been showing you these crops one by one and they are all great. But there is a reason every single one of them grows vertical. It is not just about space. It is not just about keeping fruit off the ground. It is about water. And once you understand this, you will look at your whole garden differently. When a plant sprawls horizontally across your garden bed, the soil beneath that plant is exposed to sunlight from the sides. It heats up, and hot soil loses water fast. In a U.S. summer, bare soil can lose 1 to 1.5 inches of water per week to evaporation alone, just evaporation, before any plant ever drinks a drop. When you grow vertically, you change that equation. Every foot of vine you send upward instead of sideways is another foot of soil that stays shaded, stays cooler, stays moist longer after rain. These 9 crops are not just drought tolerant, they are drought efficient. They reduce your garden's water loss just by the way they grow. That is the thing nobody tells you about vertical gardening. All right, 2 more crops before the one I mentioned at the very beginning. Stay with me. Crop 7, Malabar Gourd/fig leaf gourd. Malabar gourd is one of the oldest cultivated plants in the Western Hemisphere. Pre-Columbian farmers in South and Central America grew it specifically as a drought buffer crop, something planted not as the main harvest, but as insurance, something that would produce food when everything else failed. The vines are thick, heavy. When you crack open a stem, you can feel the moisture stored inside. This plant does not wait for rain and then panic. It banks moisture during wet periods and draws on it during dry ones. The biology is different from most vegetables you have ever grown. Here's what most people who grow it throw away, and you should not: the young shoots. In the first 60 days of growth, before the fruit is anywhere close to ready, the plant is producing tender shoot tips that are completely edible. Cooked, they taste somewhere between asparagus and zucchini, slightly earthy, slightly sweet. They are ready 2 months before the fruit, which means you are harvesting food from the plant for almost the entire season. The mature flesh of the gourd is mild and starchy. It absorbs flavor beautifully and works well in soups, curries, and braised dishes. The seeds roast up like pumpkin seeds. You are getting 3 foods from one plant in a drought. Zones 8 through 11. Needs a long season and a strong structure. This is a big plant. In South Texas and Florida, along coastal California, it can overwinter and come back the following year as a perennial. Okay, 7 crops, 2 more. And one of them is the one I have been promising you since the first 30 seconds of this video. The crop that survived 47 days without rain. We are almost there. Crop 8, edible passion flower/Maypop. If you have driven through the Southeast in July or August and noticed a vine along a fence or a roadside with the strangest, most elaborate flower you have ever seen, purple and white, almost mechanical looking, like something from a different planet, that was almost certainly Maypop. Passiflora incarnata, native passion flower, and it was edible the entire time you drove past it. Most people in the South have seen this plant. Most of them have no idea it produces fruit. Yellow, about the size of a golf ball, with a tropical flavor that is genuinely surprising the first time you taste it. Sweet, tart, a little like a combination of guava and citrus. It falls off the vine when it is ripe. The ground tells you when to harvest. But what makes Maypop special for drought gardening is what happens underground. In its first season, Maypop puts down a deep, fleshy taproot. Not wide, deep. By year 2, that root is searching for water in places most vegetables could never reach. During the brutal dry stretches of a southern summer when everything else needs help, Maypop is fine. More than fine. In zones 6 through 10, Maypop is a perennial. Plant it once. It dies back to the ground in winter and comes back every spring. The root keeps getting deeper and stronger every year. After 5 years, this plant is essentially indestructible. Plant native cultivars, Passiflora incarnata, is the species to look for. Available from Companion Plants Nursery, strictly medicinal seeds, and local native plant societies across the Southeast and Midwest.
You have probably driven past this plant 100 times. Next summer, you will be eating from it.
Remember what I said at the very beginning of this video? The crop that kept producing through 47 consecutive days without rain. I told you I'd get to it. Here it is. Crop 9, Tepary Beans, the full story. I know I already introduced Tepary Beans. I told you about the history. I told you about my grandfather's row along the fence. But what I didn't tell you was what was happening in my yard during the summer. I counted those 47 days. It was the worst summer I had in 19 years of gardening. We did not get significant rain from the first week of June until the third week of July. The temperatures were relentless. 100, 102, 105. The tomatoes were burned back. The zucchini was dead by the 4th of July. I lost 2 pepper plants I had been nursing along since February. I walked out to my garden every morning mostly to confirm how bad it was.
But in the back corner, along the chain link fence where I had strung up a Tepary bean vine in April almost as an experiment, something was happening.
The vine had not slowed down. It looked rough, dusty, the way Tepary always looks. The leaves were smaller than they would be in a wet year, but it was flowering, and when the flowers dropped, pods were setting behind them. In the middle of the worst drought I had seen in nearly 2 decades. Producing. I harvested beans from that fence in late July. Dry beans, the kind you shell and store. Enough for several meals. From a plant I watered exactly 3 times after it germinated. That is not a marketing claim. That is what happened in my yard, in Zone 7B, in one of the hottest and driest summers on record. To grow them, plant in late spring, after soil has warmed. Push seeds an inch deep, 4 inches apart, along any fence line. Do not pamper them. Do not overwater. This plant was bred for scarcity, and too much water genuinely confuses it. Give it something to climb. Give it heat, then leave it alone. I want to spend the last few minutes of the teaching part of this video on the practical side, because the number one question I get about vertical gardening is about structure. What do I actually grow these on? The good news is you probably already have something that works. Chain link fence. If you have a chain link fence along any edge of your property, every single one of these 9 crops will grow on it. No modification, no expense. Just plant at the base and walk away. Cattle panel arch. This is my favorite structure for the garden. A 16-foot cattle panel costs around $30 to $40 at Tractor Supply. Bend it into an arch between 2 raised beds or 2 sections of ground. It lasts 20 years. Luffa, Tromboncino, Armenian Cucumber, they all love an arch. The fruit hangs down underneath and you harvest standing up. Bamboo TP, 6 bamboo poles from any hardware store, $8 tied at the top. Perfect for Yardlong Beans and Malabar Spinach. Takes 10 minutes to build. You can make 3 of them for the cost of a bag of fertilizer. Stacked tomato cages and 2 heavy-duty cages from Home Depot, stacked and wired together, give you 6 feet of vertical structure. Works well for Tepary beans and for Maypop in its first season before it gets big enough to need something larger. Pergola or arbor. If you have one or are thinking about building one, Luffa and Malabar Gourd are your plants. Grow them overhead and they will create a living canopy. Shade for you. Cooler soil beneath, food hanging above your head all summer. Every gardener I know who has tried one vertical drought crop ends up growing 3 or 4 of them within 2 seasons. It changes how you see your yard. Space you thought was unusable becomes productive. Fences become gardens. The whole place looks different. Here's what I want you to think about. Next August, you walk out at 7 a.m. and it is already hot. You can feel it before you even open the back door. It is going to be a brutal day. The forecast says 100 degrees, no rain in sight, but instead of walking out to see failure, you walk out to see a fence covered in Yardlong beans, a trellis heavy with Armenian cucumbers, a Tepary bean vine doing its quiet, unhurried thing in the back corner where nothing ever grew before, a loofah climbing the arch you put up last fall, the gourds hanging down like they have been waiting for you. That is not luck. That is not a green thumb. That is just knowing which plants were built for this. That is just making different choices in spring than you made last year. These 9 crops do not need you to fight the summer for them. They were made for it. They came from deserts and tropics and fence lines and abandoned lots. They have been producing through American heat since before most of us were born. We just stopped growing them. You were never told they existed. Now you know. And here's the thing I want to leave you with. If this season has been rough, if August already took a few things from you and you are watching this wondering whether it is even worth trying again, I understand that feeling. I had it for years. But spring comes back. It always comes back. And when it does, you are going to be ready in a way you have never been ready before. You know what to plant now. You know what survives. You know what keeps going when everything else quits. Go try one of these. Just one. Pick the one that fits your zone and your space and plant it next season. And when it produces, in the heat, in the drought, in the middle of a summer that has everyone else in your neighborhood giving up, you are going to feel something. That is what this kind of gardening is supposed to feel like. And one more thing before you go. Everything I just showed you, all 9 of these crops, they work even better with one thing underneath them. And most American gardeners skip it entirely because it happens in fall, when the garden feels like it is over, and you are already thinking about other things. Next week, I am going to show you what I do to my soil every single fall. I have been doing it this way for 11 years. It is the reason drought-tolerant crops establish so much faster in my beds. It is the reason I lose fewer plants in the first 2 weeks after transplant, which is when most gardeners lose them. It takes about 45 minutes. It costs almost nothing. Most of the materials come from the garden itself. If you are planning to try any of these 9 crops next season, you are going to want to see that one first.